Oh, I tell you what, look at this. It's a wonderful little lasagna. These are just done in some simple ramekins. This recipe can also be done in a large dish. That way you can do pre-done individual portions, or you can just do a large one for a family to dip from. So either way, works great. Try this lasagna recipe. You're going to be surprised at how good it is. Hello, welcome back to Texas Cooking Today. On this episode of Texas Cooking Today, we're going to be making an Italian favorite, lasagna. Hey, yummy, extra good. Tell you what, come a little bit closer. Let me show you the ingredients that we're going to be using, and let's get started making the lasagna. Now let's go over our ingredients. Let's start with what we're going to be using in the way of a pasta. Over here I have some semolina. This is 100% durum wheat semolina, and that's half a cup. I have 3/4 of a cup of flour, a half a teaspoon of salt, 2 eggs, and some olive oil. That's going to be used in our pasta. Now, for the sauce itself, we're going to keep it very, very simple. It's going to be just a little bit of tomato sauce, some tomato paste, and this is 8 ounces of each, and also some fresh basil, and you're going to want anywhere from 1/4 of a cup to a half a cup of finely chopped basil. Now, on our filling, also on the sauce, we got some wine over here. I'm using a white Zinfandel. You can use a rosé for this also. You just want a light wine that's not too strong. It'll be fruity and kind of sweet, and it'll work very well with this very basic marinara that we're going to make our lasagna with. Back here I have some spinach leaves, ricotta cheese, mozzarella cheese, and Parmesan. So we get a good cheesy flavor on this. Now also, if you want to make this a meat lasagna, all you have to do is just add about a half a pound to a pound of hamburger meat and cook that up separate from the sauce, and then mix it into the sauce once you've browned it lightly, and everything will go fine on this sauce afterwards. So let's get on with making lasagna. We're going to start with our pasta. Okay, we are now ready to make our pasta. The traditional way of making a pasta like this is to simply put your flour in the middle of the board and combine the other ingredients with it right there. I don't like having to clean up a big old board, so I just like to use something that's easier to clean, and I'm going to use a bowl. Now, what I want to do is to first put my 3/4 of a cup of flour in this. You can use an all-purpose flour for this, but frankly, the bread flour works better. Reason being, this game is all about gluten. Now, you hear these days, oh, watch out for gluten, it's a bad thing. Well, no, gluten's not a bad thing. Gluten's just a protein structure. It's the protein structure that occurs in the husk of the wheat kernel, okay? So, here I have some semolina, and this is even higher in gluten than a bread flour would be. Now, I'm using bread flour and semolina combined. And the reason I'm not doing all semolina is because if you're doing that, I want to show you how to roll this out by hand. And if you're doing that, if you're doing all semolina, it makes it very difficult to roll out by hand, and not something that I recommend for the beginner to try. I'd like to recommend, if you do all semolina pasta, which is really the best way, that you have some sort of pasta rollers available. Otherwise, go ahead and use flour. It'll make it easier. Now, in the center of the bowl that I have here, the flour, I want to make a little bit of a well. So I'm just going to push everything aside with my fingers, just a little bit. And that way the eggs can sit right in the center. The reason behind that is I'm going to scramble the eggs and then slowly beat the flour into them from that point, and it makes for an easier mix. You don't have lumps this way. And this is also, like I said, it's a traditional way of doing this. Now I want to go ahead and put my salt right down in here. And believe it or not, I told you I have mistakes and everything else on this show. Occasionally we have a broken egg, like I just had roll off of my counter. So let me deal with that and get in a fresh egg, and we're ready to go with this. Disaster averted, it's all cleaned up. Now, 2 eggs, and what I want to do with each of these eggs is to first crack them into a separate bowl. And I do this so that I can look at the egg and make sure it has the right appearance, also smell it. No foul odor, which is a good sign the egg is alright. if you have a bad egg, you want to discover it before you taint the rest of your ingredients. Okay, that one's good also. Want to give a quick rinse with my fingers. There we are. Now, I have a little olive oil here. Something that you want in your pasta is going to help make it a little more pliable, give it a good texture. That was about a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half. Break your yolks and just go to scrambling them right in the middle of it. There we are. I'll take a little bit of flour, put it in my hand, and I do this so that the flour won't stick to, or the dough rather, won't stick to me as bad. Kind of gives me a little protection. Now, for pasta to be rolled out successfully and easily, it doesn't work well if you go and immediately start trying to roll this out. It has a tendency, when you roll it out, it'll just shrink right back up. So, we rest the pasta first. That helps some of the gluten development, and it helps get it under control so that it doesn't shrink up as much when we roll it. Okay? Now we're right on to the next mission, which is, if I remember right, we need to start our sauce mixture. Alright, we are now going to make our sauce, and we're going to start by getting our basil leaves prepared. Now, when I have a leaf like this, you might notice some dark marks on it like this. That's just a little bit of bruising. Don't worry about that. It will not affect the flavor or quality of this dish at all. Pluck your basil leaves off of their stems. Don't cut up the stems and put them in there, just the leaf itself. Now, when we're going to do a chiffonade, we first have to kind of get our leaves in order so that we can cut them. And I just want a stack that is neat, but I can roll. And I want my larger leaves on the bottom, graduating to the smaller leaves on top. And you can have big ones on top too, it won't matter. I just want to get all those little ones up in there. Oops, just jumping out on me. Okay, now that I got a nice little stack of leaves, and we'll take that stack and just gently roll it, see? Rolling it over, nice and tight. Now, to do a chiffonade like this, what you need to understand is you need to hold the vegetable with your thumb on the back here, curve your fingers under so the tips are kind of facing back, and this part of the knuckle right here is straight up and down. That way the knife can run along that. Okay, and then when we're doing this, I can slowly work my fingers back. My thumb helps to hold the vegetable steady, and I can just keep making these nice thin slices. Now if you notice, I don't make an up and down chopping motion, but a forward to backward slicing motion. Now I want to rock it back and forth to cut those little strips down. Go through it again, and there I have beautiful chopped basil. And it's a nice chop because all the leaves aren't bruised in it, they're in good condition. Now I have there just somewhere between, as I mentioned before, a quarter to a half a cup, and that is just perfect. Now let's get right on to working the sauce itself. Alright, to start our sauce, we're going to begin with that 8 ounces of paste. That was tomato paste. And our 8 ounces of tomato sauce. There we go. Those bowls cleaned out real well. And we need a whisk to work this with. I'm going to go ahead and use my whisk to clean off that spatula. There we go. And at this point, we also want to start working in our wine. And this is a very simple recipe. I tell you what, when it comes to marinaras like this, you're going to have better success with people liking them if you keep the ingredients simple. I have for many years used a group of spices, or excuse me, a group of herbs, which I call the Italian 4, in a wok of my sauces. And that, of course, would be rosemary, thyme, oregano, and basil. And they work well together, but that makes a really heavy sauce. Super for spaghetti, but in lasagna, it makes the lasagna a little darker than I want. The same way I'm using a light wine in this rather than a burgundy, it gives me that lighter flavor, more distinguishable flavors. And within that, I end up with something that people like a lot better. They recognize the flavors in it better. It doesn't seem overwhelming or confusing. So truly, when it comes to these marinaras, keep them simple, and you're doing yourself a huge favor. Now, on that wine, you're going to need anywhere from 2 to about 3 cups of wine, and I'm going to go ahead and add in just a little more on this, and you can also add water to this as well, but I want it to be an extremely thin mixture. I went ahead and poured up another cup of the white Zinfandel wine, and a rosé works really well for this also. It would be a little bit more on cue with true Italian cooking, but hey, remember, this is Texas cooking, and we get to cheat on stuff like this. Frankly, I've done this particular recipe several times, and doing it this way, it comes out absolutely fantastic. Now, these leaves will sometimes stick to your whisk. Don't worry about that. Happens to the best of us. A little more of this. And I want to cover this, bring it to a simmer. I want to allow that to simmer for about 30 minutes. There is one thing I wanted to mention about this, and it is an important little bit. If you'll notice, I've made this sauce unusually thin, very watery, and that's quite on purpose. Because we are not going to be pre-cooking the pasta, but rather putting it in there just freshly rolled, then I can have a really thin sauce like this, and the extra moisture from my sauce cooks into the pasta to cook it. And that way, by the time the lasagna is finished, the sauce has thickened, the pasta is full of moisture that's flavored, and it is just a wonderful dish at that point. Now, if you're not going to be making your own pasta fresh, go ahead and make this a much thicker mixture. You can get away with about a cup to a cup and a half of the white Zinfandel, and then just mix that up, and of course boil your pre-made noodles as you normally would. Now, just as we did with our basil, I want to do the same thing with my spinach leaves. So all I need to do is go ahead and get these kind of collected into a single pile. And I have here what looks like about 2 cups of chopped spinach. And I'm going to be putting that with a total of 16 ounces, or basically 1 pint of ricotta. Now, if you're going to be making a large lasagna, you're going to need more ricotta than that, so just double that up. So I'm going to put that right in there. And once again, this is one of those jobs for a simple fork. So just break out a fork and start working the two together. Do you need an egg in this? Absolutely not. Do not put an egg in your filling in lasagna or ravioli or anything like that. That is not done, okay? Absolutely not needed. Now I'm going to put a little salt in here. This is going to be about 1/4 teaspoon of salt, just enough to bring out some flavor. And there I have a beautiful ricotta and spinach filling. And I got plenty of spinach in there. And this also works as a great filling for ravioli too. So there we have it. I'm ready to move right on to the next deal. And that's going to be, as soon as the simmering is finished and my pasta is finished resting, we're going to roll out the pasta and start making some wonderful little lasagnas. Our marinara has now been simmering for about 30 minutes. Let's shut off the heat under that for just a moment. That way it doesn't splatter out while we're working on it. I need to put a little salt in this. There we go. It's about 1/2 teaspoon right there. Yeah. Now, it's still thin, but it's thickening slightly, and I want to add the remainder of that white zin, making a full 3 cups. Now, I'm just going to allow it to sit and simmer for about another 15 minutes, and then we're ready to make our lasagna. Let's go ahead and take care of rolling out our pasta now. A couple of things I could do. If I wanted, I could reduce this to some smaller portions and roll those. But in this case, I think I'm just going to roll the whole thing out, and it's going to make a large sheet. Now, before I start that, I need to break out some flour. You remember that flour we had out earlier? Go ahead and use it. And you're going to need plenty of it. And for what I'm doing here, we're going to be making some lasagnas. And if you wanted to put this in a large pan, you just make large cuts of it, and you have single large sheets to work with. And it makes life a lot easier when you're working with pasta. There are 2 different tools that you can use with pasta when cutting it. One's a pasta roller like this. Sometimes they come as separate wheels, sometimes there's a joint wheel like this. This one's kind of interesting. And also you can just use a plain regular knife to make cuts with. And we can do it either way. Now what I have here is one of my ramekins. I'm going to be making really small lasagnas for myself. And of course, like I said, if you want a larger one, then just cut larger sheets. In this case, what I'm going to be doing is making small, simple little pasta rounds. And as I mentioned before, you can use a pasta cutter. And what you want to do is stay inside of the little circle that you just cut. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be pretty. You just need a little round that's going to sit down inside of that dish. There we have it. One simple little round. It'll go right down in there just perfect. The other way will be to use a simple knife. And again, staying inside of the circle. Getting a little outside of my line there. Make simple cuts. Pull them out. There you have it. I can save the rest of this for doing some other pasta if I wish. And the thing of it is you don't want to overwork pasta, so this part right here, if I re-knead it and roll that out again, it's going to make a much tougher pasta, okay? So you need to kind of be aware of that happening. Now, I have these little darlings. Let's go and assemble our lasagna. It's time for us to assemble these little lasagnas. Now here, I have my sauce all ready for us right over here. I got the ramekins back there on a sheet pan. That's what I want to bake them on. And of course my cheese mixtures and pasta right over here. So let's go ahead and get started on these little darlings. And I have a ladle for my sauce. This is a 1/4 cup ladle. It's a nice small one. It works really well for what I'm doing here. Put about 1/4 cup on the bottom of that. That was our pasta round that was the worst of them all. Now, some of my cheese mixture. Just want a nice flat pat of cheese mixture that I can put right on top there. Finish filling it around the edges. Just like so. One more. Very simple that is. Another, which one do I want to put that cheese on there? Another pasta right here. Again, another 1/4 cup of our marinara. And over the top of that, I want a good melting cheese. So I want to put some mozzarella. And then on top of that, I want a little bit of a cheese that provides a nice, sharp, distinct flavor. So let's put that Parmesan over it. And there we have it. And I'm going to do each and every one of these the same way. Now, if you'd like, on your lasagnas, on the large one, if you're doing a single one, do it exactly the same way. Of course, you're going to use more marinara than a 1/4 cup. The idea is you want to use a lot more marinara than it looks like you would normally want to use. The reason? Remember, it's thin. The water from it has to cook into this pasta. And these, there's no rule that says these have to be perfect, alright? Another layer. My pasta. Quarter of a cup of milk there. I keep wanting to grab the wrong cheese. Mozzarella. And these may spill over a little bit when you're baking them, but hey, you know, it won't happen, but it's enough of it that it'll matter. Just enough to make a slight mess on the outside of the dish. Okay, let's go ahead and get these in the oven. It is now preheated. 350 degrees, and that's going to take anywhere from about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on the dish and the altitude. Okay, now if you're wondering about how hot, it should be about 160 degrees inside in the center. And you don't need it really much hotter than that. You're not trying to cook the cheese, you're just trying to get the pasta cooked through, the cheese melted on top. The sauce that's in there is already cooked, so it's just a matter of getting everything to combine the right way in the oven, and then it's finished. These have just now come out of the oven, and if you will notice, I've got some spots where, of course, as I mentioned before, they boiled over. Well, as you can see, it's just not that tough to make lasagna. Now, let's take a look inside of this little guy. Oh, I've been waiting for this. You know, cut through that pasta. Ricotta that's up in there, full of spinach. Oh yeah. Some of that pasta. The pasta, when you do it this way, it comes out to a perfect al dente every time. The sauce is just big enough, not too much of it. Everything just comes together in one big harmony. It's all about making this dish a little more simple. When you do that, you've got an excellent dish. I can't wait to dig into the rest of that. The sauce with its basil and wine flavor. Oh, and the cheese with the spinach. I tell you, that's called good eating. And that's just good comfort food too. And I'd like to say thank you very much for watching Texas Cooking Today. And please subscribe. And you have a good day. Thank you for watching Texas Cooking Today, the show where you can get great recipes and the best techniques are taught. Please subscribe to Texas Cooking Today, where you will always find something hot and ready to eat.